it. And any portion that you may miss or someone else couldn't make it, they'll be able to check this session out on the web. Also, at the end of my remarks, there'll be an opportunity for you all to ask any questions that you all have, and you're going to want to ask those questions in the Q&A. And once we get to that section, Hilda Rojas Duarte will ask the questions that you all have put in, and we'll attempt to get to as many questions as possible. The third thing is that I do have my dog with me, because if she's not with me, she will bark, and I don't want her to bark. So she's here. She'll be our additional panelist as well. So everybody say, hey, Zane. All right. Lastly, before we get started, I am a city boy, and so you may hear some city noises in the background. That's okay. We'll just keep rolling with those punches if we hear any of that as well. So with that, again, thank you so much for joining us, and I'm going to go ahead and get started. If you have, again, any questions, make sure you put those in the Q&A. All right, so what we know right now is that this has been an extremely difficult time for the entire Roosevelt community, the city, our nation, and the world. When we started this year, obviously we had no way of knowing the impact that COVID-19 would have on all of us. And while we have all lost a lot due to this virus, what has become extremely clear to me during this time is that the resilience of our students, faculty, and staff is really unmatched. And I'm extremely awed and amazed by the work that you all continue to do. I've definitely seen the absolute best of us during this time, and I know that we will absolutely get through this thing together. And so the intention of this is to talk a little bit about what students are experiencing right now and what we've done to support students through this crisis. So I want to first start off by talking a little bit about some of the immediate steps that we took. So when it became very clear to us that COVID-19 was on its way to the States, we immediately began to plan and think about how will this impact our students and what can we do to support them. So we, of course, were following the guidance of the public health officials. We immediately built a COVID-19 response website, which many of you, I'm sure, have seen, which housed a number of updates that we put out regularly. We decided to extend spring break for students to allow us to transition to online and remote learning. And we also encourage students who were living in the residence halls who could return home to do so. All student services were immediately placed online and remain available for student use online. And then the governor issued the stay-at-home order. And that kind of changed things, because until that point, we didn't really know where things were going to go. And we realized that we're going to be away from campus for a while. And this kind of became our new normal. So we began to think about, what does this mean for us? So at that point, we decided to close campus to all non-essential personnel, and only residents are allowed to be in the buildings currently. We also extended the drop date to May 1st to allow more time for students who were experiencing difficulty and challenges to be able to drop their courses. We also guaranteed that all federal work-study students would continue to receive their pay for the remainder of the academic years. And so those are some of the things that we did immediately in response to the COVID-19 crisis. But one of the things that we want to be really, really cognizant of and considerate of is the student voice, because it's so important for us to always know what the students are thinking and what they're feeling. And so one of the things that I'm really proud about is that we are in constant contact with your Student Government Association. And I want to send a huge shout out, I don't know if they're on or not, to Leo Rojas, Darrell Reed, and Annie Mae Pond. They're your president, vice president, and board of trustee representative. And we've had regular meetings with both myself, President Ali, and Provost Becker to discuss what students are feeling and to figure out how we can better serve students during this time. So some of the things that we talked about in those meetings were the transition to academic learning online and how students were kind of dealing with that. Also plans for fall, and I'll talk a little bit more about that later on. They also had a really great idea to survey students to get a direct way to understand what the impact was. And I'll be going over what those results were that we learned from the student survey. And lastly, they want to know more about what the academic options were if students were struggling academically to succeed, given that many students were not necessarily prepared to go fully online. Another thing that happened was that a number of students got together and decided that the information that we had put out about the pass fails wasn't immediately clear in terms of what the options were. And I'm so happy to see that, because what we know is that Roosevelt University was built on people raising their voices. And so I was glad to see that so many students were sharing with us that the options weren't all the way clear. And we all agreed that we weren't going to do a universal policy, and students also felt that that was a good policy to have, but we wanted to make sure that we were communicating what our policy was really, really well. And so we decided to send out another communication to students to talk about the pass-fail options, the incomplete options, as well as the late withdrawal. And so what this showed us was that maybe we weren't communicating as great as we thought we were. And so we decided to send out a social media poll to chat with students to see, how do you want to be communicated with during this time? And we got some surprising information from that. 85% of you surprisingly said that you wanted emails. I didn't think you all read them, but you want them. So that was really great to see. Also, 77% of you said that you want to receive text messages. So you'll notice that over the past 2 weeks, you've already started to see much more things come to you via text. Also, 76% of you said that you wanted to engage with us more on social media. So we've also been updating our posts more regularly to keep communications with you all going. What you also said with us is that you don't want us to call you. 74% of you said, no, do not call my cell phone. So we are now aware of that. And so we'll make sure that we're not calling for things that are not critically important. But there was one thing that we thought was critically important to call you guys about. Given that this is an unprecedented time, we wanted to directly reach out to each of you that we could and just engage with you about how things were going and what resources we had and how we could support you. So what we decided to do was to do a phone campaign and call our freshmen and our sophomores. And right now we're in the process of calling our graduate students. We've called over 600 students thus far. And for those students that we weren't able to reach via phone, we also followed up with them via email. And so many of you would have received that communication from staff. And so what I learned as a key takeaway is that, again, you all are extremely resilient and that you all are making the best out of a not great situation. I talked with students about some of the ways that they were engaging with faculty, some of the ways they were engaging with other students, and I'll share some tidbits about that a little bit later on. So I want to talk more now about the student survey in general. So you all received the link to share with us a little bit more about what your experiences have been during this time. 836 of you responded to the survey, and we got some really interesting data. So we asked about a number of things, but I want to pull out some of the highlights for you all to share. One of the things that we asked was, to what extent do you have reliable internet access? Because it's impossible to do online learning if you can't connect online, right? And so we learned that 74% of you did actually have reliable internet access. But 4% of you said that it was extremely difficult to get connected to the internet. And so I'm going to talk about how we address that a little bit later, but I thought that was really interesting information for us to have. Secondly, we asked, what do you use to get connected online? Do you use your laptop? Do you use your computer, your cell phone? 70% of students mainly use their computers. 92% said that they always, either mostly or always use their computer. But interestingly, 22% of students always use a cell phone. And that could be for a number of reasons, but we know that's not necessarily the most ideal way to write a term paper or do statistical analysis, right? And so that's something that as an institution, we're wrestling with and trying to figure out how we can support students better. And I'll talk a little bit later about how we've already done some of that. We also want to know, my dog is sneezing. That's what that, I chew, you keep hearing it. So Zanny, calm. So one of the other things that we asked about is, to what degree have the following technology issues been a challenge? And we asked a number of things in terms of access to special software, wide use of communication tools, and of the list of things that students were most unable to access. One was access to library resources. And the second thing is instructor discomfort or lack of familiarity with required technologies or applications. And so we knew in advance that it was going to be a huge transition to go to online learning in as little as really 1 week. And what some of you are experiencing is not the model for remote learning, but it's what we had to do in such a short amount of time. But I'm so impressed by our faculty and our IT staff who took the initiative to really make this work and to make it something that would still benefit students and make sure that we're providing that world first class educational experience that we're committed to. Over 1,000 faculty registrants have signed up for a number of different training sessions. And so a number of the things that they're being trained on, we hope that you all are starting to see now, and we'll also see in the summer as we'll be moving again online for summer as well. The other thing that we asked about is to what has been the most challenging in terms of going online. And one of the things that you all share with us is that some of the course lessons haven't necessarily translated well to a remote environment. And I think that's part of the fact that we offer such a rich array of educational opportunities here at Roosevelt. So if you're a student at Roosevelt, you can study to become a world-class dancer. You could study to become a pharmacist. You could study to become an opera singer, or you can study to become a journalist, right? And so we have a wide variety of academic opportunities, but that doesn't always lend itself to remote learning. So for example, how do you teach dance in an online environment? That can be a little bit difficult and challenging. So we definitely understand that concern, and we're working very hard to figure out how we do those things come fall in ways that are still instructive and that you all will enjoy, and that you all feel that you're getting the benefit of the educational experience. We also want to know a little bit about what your thoughts were regarding fall and how you were feeling about things. And the two top responses that we got were, one, you're really concerned about fall because you don't really know what's going to happen with COVID, so it's kind of hard to plan what fall for you is going to look like. Also, we learned that money is a huge concern. Many folks have lost their jobs, their parents may have been furloughed or laid off, and it's really, really difficult right now for students financially. So that in some ways puts a strain on what they're able to do regarding finances and education. And so what we did very, very early on was we wanted to think about how do we help support students financially. Of course, the phone calls are great and sending the student surveys, but we understood that students were really hurting as well as their families. And so we wanted to think about what we could do to lighten the load a little bit. And so we introduced the Laker Grant Fund. And this is something that was in existence prior to COVID-19. It was actually started by students who allocated $10,000 to get the fund going. Students saying that, hey, we know the students encounter all different types of challenges during the year. So we want to provide this $10,000 to students to be able to support them. So luckily we already had that fund. And so since we knew we had that fund, we began to broadly communicate about the fund to make sure that you all were aware that this was a resource that we had available on campus. Prior to COVID-19, we had only 5 students who had requested funds from the grant. Since COVID-19, we've had over 300 students reach out with requests to find ways to support the financial needs that they had. And we're really, really glad and happy that we're able to support so many students. Part of what we knew, though, was that $10,000 was not going to be able to support 300 students. And so we very quickly put out a campaign through institutional advancement to raise more money to support students who were in need. And I'm happy to share that because of you and your generosity, we raised over $55,000 for the Laker Grant Fund. And that is incredible. And that has really gone a long way in terms of helping students. To date, we've awarded students $62,461. And that has gone to support students paying their utility bills, childcare costs, healthcare needs, the cost of laptops and computers and other technology needs. And I thought it was important to share with you a little bit about one student who wrote to us and shared what the Laker Grant has meant to them. And of course, I did ask for permission to share her story with all of you. So she says, first of all, I would like to say thank you to Roosevelt for the Laker Grant. This grant helped me keep my car and helped me keep my gas and electricity to a minimum during this quarantine. Needless to say that this time has been devastating for not just me, but many. I am a full-time student with 3 children, and we're all currently trying to cope and deal with adjusting to an online platform of learning. My car company would not let me put my payment on hold during this time, and I was left wondering if they were going to take it away. I have never made a late payment, and with a job loss, I was worried and upset about how they handled my situation, as this car is my only means of transportation. Thanks to the Laker Grant, I was able to finish making the car payment and pay down my electricity and gas bill as well. This was more than enough to help ease a little bit of the stress while I continue to work through this quarantine with my kids. I'm forever appreciative to staff and faculty, and especially to those responsible for making the Laker Grant available to aid students like myself who are in need during this crisis. And I share that because that story is one of hundreds that we received. And it's not just that student, it's so many of you who are going through difficult times, and we know and we understand. And we realize that the Laker Grant can't help support every student, but we're constantly looking for different resources to share with you all that will be able to provide more support. One of those is through the CARES Act. So you may have heard recently about the CARES Act being provided to institutions of higher education, allocations based on student need. And this funding is supposed to go directly to students to support their emergent needs. And so Roosevelt is eligible to receive up to $6 million in funds from the federal government. 50% of those funds must go directly to emergency student need. And this is going to operate a little bit differently than the Laker Grant Fund, as this will go directly through the financial aid process. It will be available to current freshmen, sophomores, juniors, and non-graduating seniors who were not fully on 100% online prior to March 13th. The difficulty with the CARES Act, though, is that it presents some equity challenges. So for example, DACA students are not eligible to receive this. Also, international students aren't also eligible to receive this as well. And so we began to think about, well, how can we continue to support students who fall into this category to not get CARES Act funding? And so one of the things that we're proud to announce is that come fall, we'll be rolling out our Stronger Tuition Grant. So right now, we're raising funds to be able to support students on a one-time basis in terms of a tuition payment. So again, as I mentioned earlier, the student that I read their story about, that's so many of you. And so the Stronger Tuition Grant will help support your tuition costs for fall, and we'll be rolling out more information about that very, very soon, as well as the CARES Act and how students will be able to get funds allocated through the CARES Act. Now I want to transition a little bit and talk about some housing updates that I think many of you might be interested in hearing about. One of the things that I want to share was that we never closed or shut down our dining facilities or our housing operations. We knew that we have a very special student population, and many students did not have any other options but to stay in housing. Many of our international students were here, and many students maybe didn't have safe houses or homes to go to. And so we very clearly made the decision to remain open to support those students and make sure that they had a place to go during this very, very difficult time. But we also realized that some students who were able to go home did go home and didn't receive the full benefit of certain services. And so we decided to offer a meal plan credit to students who had signed up for housing and weren't able to fully utilize that credit. You all should have received an update about that in your emails discussing the $400 meal plan credit that will be rolling over to you all's student account in fall. We also have been working with the University Center to make sure that our students at the University Center are able to receive some level of a credit with their meal plans as well. We don't have the full details of that, but we hope to be able to share an update with you all very, very shortly on that. We also extended move out from May 12th to June 7th. So once the governor extended his stay-at-home order, we realized that it was not really safe for you all to come back right now. And so we want to provide a little more time for you to come back and be safe as you packed up your rooms and moved on with the rest of your summer. So we extended that to June 7th. Also, we decided to incentivize the students who are here who maybe couldn't return, but also were interested in taking summer courses. So a student who's currently in the halls who maybe can't go home, they can get a 25% discount on the cost of summer housing if they enroll in a summer course. Now I want to transition and talk a little bit about fall housing and some things that will be different there. So one thing that we've decided to do is to eliminate the housing requirement for this upcoming year. You should have received an email about this yesterday discussing the full details of what this means for you and your family. So essentially, because we can't really say for sure what classes will be online and what will be in person, we thought it would be unfair to require students to live on campus, and it might also be a real financial struggle and strain for a lot of you to afford the cost of housing. So we've eliminated the housing requirement for this year. We've also reduced the number of available beds in housing because we want to be mindful of the social distancing that was happening in the halls. And so we, as a result of that, have moved to a single versus a shared model, which is different from what you may have experienced presently, which was pricing based on bed type. But the great thing is that this allowed us to actually reduce the cost of housing so that now students are paying a lower cost for rooms that would have traditionally been the doubles, and the triples. And so we're really, really excited to be able to, again, reduce costs because we know that this is something that will matter to students and parents and families. The second thing that we're doing for fall housing is we've provided 2 out periods for housing because we know right now maybe you don't feel 100% comfortable signing up for a housing contract. So if you do sign up now, you'll be able to get out of that contract with no penalty all the way up until the first fall move-in date. And then once you're in, you'll have, again, spring in order to get out of the spring portion of the contract if something happens, because we are anticipating that some COVID-19 might pop back up in fall. So we want to provide an out clause in the spring contract as well. So we were really excited to be able to do that and make sure that we're thinking about continuous ways to support students. One thing that was important to us is that we wanted to make sure that students remained engaged to one another, engaged with Roosevelt, and engaged to the larger community. And so we very quickly moved a number of our programs to be online. So to date, we've had over 51 online programs with over 239 student participants. And I'm told that we had over 3,000 impressions on Instagram. Now, I don't know what that means because I'm not really an Instagram tech person, but I'm told that that is a very good number. So really excited about that. Our athletic teams have also been remaining engaged because we know many of them weren't able to complete their seasons. And so we want to think about how can we continue to engage our athletes. So they're doing virtual workouts with one another. They are taking over our social media. You may have noticed one of our players take over our social media. They're doing various challenges and they're getting connected to one another as well on social media. The other thing that we're able to do was still hold our student government elections online. And many of you voted for the next student body president and vice president. So if you happen to see Lily Previous, she's your new president, and Lexi Judd will be your new vice president. So if they're on, definitely send them a huge shout out and congratulations on winning those elections. Lastly, I want to talk a little bit about preparing for fall because I know based on the student survey data that that's something that you all are really, really curious about and something that is at the forefront of you all's minds. So there are a lot of things, as you all know, that are still unknown and are uncertain. And we're continuing to work through a lot of the questions that even we have about what fall will look like. A lot of this will depend on what guidance we get from the state as well as from our public health officials. But we formed a task force, a reentry task force, that's looking at a number of these questions to be able to provide more information about what this may mean. But we know that no matter what, fall is going to look a little bit different and it's going to feel a little bit different, at least until there's a vaccine. And so this might mean that there will be some additional social distancing practices in place. We might reduce the number of students in classrooms. You'll likely see a requirement of wearing masks on campus, at least for the immediate time of that initial return. But again, more detail will come out shortly about this, and much more will actually be available this Friday with President Ali's, I should say, address on Friday, May 8th at 10:30 a.m. So if you're curious about more information for fall, I would highly encourage all of you to tune in to check out his town hall meeting that he'll be giving on Friday. So with that, I am going to turn it over to Hilda, who's going to share with us some questions that you all have posed during my time of talking. So Hilda, you want to share with us what questions we have so far?
Sure. We have a question from a student that is asking, what's the
Hilda,
status?
I think you're on mute. Let's try it again.
Can you hear me now?
I can.
Great. We have a question from a student who is asking, what's the status on reimbursing crediting students meal plan and room and board costs who were not able to return to campus due to COVID-19?
That's a really great question. Thank you so much for asking it. As I chatted a little bit about earlier, we have decided to issue meal plan credits to students, and this is irrespective of whether or not a student can return to the residence halls or not. So we will look to see what was your last date of attendance, and any student who was gone prior to April 1st will receive a partial meal plan credit based on the amount that you have remaining. So say, for example, that I was a heavy eater, like many of our football players are, and I only have $150 left in my meal plan credit. Well, those students won't be able to get more than that $150 because that's all they have left. But if I have, say, $300 left, then I'll be eligible to get the full $300 remaining. So it really depends on what you have remaining on your meal plan credit. And again, we're working through, and that's specific to the students in Wabash. Right now, we're in conversations with the University Center to figure out how we can provide some relief to those students as it relates to the meal plan credit. But we will likely be able to do some additional relief once we receive the disbursements from the CARE Act as well. We're hoping to be able to pass on some of that saving to students.
Thank you. Another question is, how does the CARES Act funding impact graduate students?
For that question, I'm actually going to turn it over to Michelle Stipp, who is our Director of Financial Aid, and she'll talk a little bit more about that.
Sure. So graduate students are eligible for CARES Act money. The piece that Jamar spoke to so very, very well is the criteria is a little bit different. The students do need to be Title IV eligible. And so for that, we're looking at the FAFSA information. So if you want to be considered for CARES Act and haven't submitted a FAFSA but are eligible to do so, please take a few moments and get that 2019-2020 FAFSA submitted so that we can confirm you're eligible and make sure that you're included in the program.
Awesome. Thanks, Michelle.
Next question. Can you hear me? Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Next question is, will tuition be reduced if fall classes are online?
At this point, there is no plan to reduce the cost of tuition because we are still providing that educational experience that we think is so important. And so at this point, there is no plan for that, but we're constantly looking at ways to support student need. And so one of the things, again, that we're doing is providing that tuition program so that students can get a one-time cost reduction of the cost of tuition through that program. And so we're looking at that from a program incentive in terms of raising funds to support that, but the overall cost of tuition at this time is not being reduced.
Another question is, what is a graduation refund for cap and gown for graduating students?
So students are able to get a refund due to the cancellation, unfortunately, of graduation. So you should reach out to the registrar's office, who will be able to point you to the specific instructions on how to go about giving that refund. And on the point of graduation, I have some really exciting news to share with you all. We have, based on student feedback, rescheduled graduation for Friday, June 26th. The overwhelming majority of you shared that that will be the date that would work best. And we will be doing a virtual online graduation. So we're really, really excited about this. This is the first time, obviously, that we'll be doing this. It's going to be really fun and really engaging. And so I'm looking forward to sharing more information with you all about that graduation very, very soon.
Thank you. A student is asking, I applied for funding from the Laker Grant and have not heard anything back.
So since Hilda is over the Laker Grant, I'm going to ask her to share a little bit about that.
Sure. So for the student who submitted this question, please contact us at dos@roosevelt.edu with your name. We can look into your request. So at this time, the funds for the Laker Grant have been depleted. However, we were able to award over 150 students with money, and there are students that are still in our queue who had submitted requests over the last couple of weeks who we are processing their request. We had originally ran out of money, and then we got some additional money. So the people that had submitted a request, we are processing those this week. But if you submitted at any point and have a question about the status of your request, go ahead and email us and we can get back to you.
Great, thanks, Hilda. What's our next question?
Okay, there's a question that when will any funds from Betsy DeVos's release of monies to colleges around the country, this happened around 4/21/20, will it be applied for the summer semester or do we wait until fall?
So again, I'm going to pass that to Michelle, who can share some more insight on the CARES Act.
Yeah, so that's CARES Act money. That money, our goal is to get it directly to the hands of students as quickly as we can. So we will have an application process, and we hope to have more information to share with you about that very soon. But the money will be sent directly to you. It will be posted on your student account, but similar to the Laker Grant where the money is immediately refunded to you, that'll be the same process. And we're looking to do it as quickly as we can so that you don't have to wait until fall. It won't be applied to any balance on your account because we know you need those funds to offset other expenses that you're currently working through.
So I see that a few folks are putting some questions in the chat, and I want to make sure that we see your questions, and the chat will scroll up. So please make sure to put your questions in the Q&A. That way they don't disappear.
Another question. If fall classes are online, will dorm fees be refunded?
So much like now, our residence halls will remain open for student use, so we will not be closing our residence halls. So for any student who is staying in the halls, they will, of course, still have to pay for that cost. However, what we are doing is making sure that it's a lot more flexible for students. So one thing that we're doing, again, is to provide out periods for the housing contract. And so in fall, a student all the way up until fall can decide they've changed their mind and they don't want to live in housing. They have until move-in day to get out of the fall portion of the housing contract. They will also have an out period in spring. So let's say come November, things have shifted and COVID-19 is starting to pop back up again. They will then be able to just communicate with us and say, hey, I'm not interested in coming back for spring, and they will get the spring portion of their housing refunded to them. So again, there are 2 periods where a student can get out, either for the entire contract prior to the academic year or during spring, as long as they do it prior to the start of the spring semester.
Someone is asking, what are the requirements to apply for the CARES Act?
Michelle, would you like to take that?
Sure. So the main one is that you need to be considered a Title IV eligible student. And so that eligibility component is determined by the FAFSA. Again, the FAFSA is the most important piece. It's kind of like the pre-application for the CARES Act. And then you also have to be, we're giving it to undergraduate students, non-graduating students, and of course the graduate students. So we are finalizing our process, just waiting for a couple of additional items to be firmed up. And then any student that meets what I'm calling basic eligibility criteria, we're going to send you an email directly from Financial Aid Services that will include the application link, next steps, just to make sure that you have everything that you need to know kind of where you stand in the process. So as soon as you fill out your application and get it back, we're going to be reviewing them as quickly as we can to get that money posted to your student accounts and then refunded right back to you.
If we decide to take a gap year, how will that impact coming back to RU?
So that sounds a little bit like a advising and registration question, as well as a little bit about financial aid. So Katrina Coakley, who is the Associate Provost for Student Success, can share a little bit about the registration part and advising part, and then I'll turn it to Michelle, who can share a little bit about the financial aid potential implications of that.
Sure. If you decide that you would like to take some time off, well, we'd love to have you back this summer or in the fall. If you need to take some time off, all you have to do is not reapply, just let admissions know that you want to come back, and we will pass that on to advisors, and you can reach out to your advisor and you'll be all set. So it will take you meeting with an academic advisor again. So you'll want to make sure that you set up an appointment with an advisor so you can keep your current advisor. If it's a faculty advisor, if you're in the main advising office, they will make sure that they put you in contact with the right person, but we are here for you whenever you are ready to come back.
And with the financial aid piece, anytime you aren't enrolled, at least have time for a period 6 months or longer, there's the potential that you'll start repayment on those education loans. So that's an important piece to be aware of. But then as soon as you come back to school and we have your enrollment confirmed, your loans will go back on that in-school deferment and you won't have to pay on them going forward.
Can a FAFSA be resubmitted now that parent income has decreased due to the COVID related job losses?
So we have a special process just for income changes within families. So it's called the special circumstance process. There's a form out on the Roosevelt website. I believe it's under appeals, but it's out there. So if you've had financial changes, that the income information that you put on your FAFSA no longer pertains to where you are right now. This process is built to help us help you, and we will be the ones to update your FAFSA to better reflect where you are now. So one piece to keep in mind, we are asking that if it's furlough, job loss, anything related to COVID-19, that you send those items to us in June. And the reason for that is we need to let so much time elapse in order for the income adjustment that you're experiencing to really affect the way your overall financial aid is determined. So if you turn it into us now, we can work with those numbers, but the income adjustment may not be as significant if you just wait until June. So we're asking anyone who is experiencing something related to COVID-19, send us the paperwork in June. If you have any other special circumstance going on that's not related to COVID-19, please contact your financial aid counselor, because we are working on those right now. It's just the COVID-19 ones. Just hold on to those until June.
Is there a website where a lot of this information is located? And I'm assuming they're talking about like everything we've been talking about.
Yes, so much of this information is actually already out there on our COVID-19 website. And the easiest way to get there is go to the main Roosevelt webpage. At the very top, there's a banner that will direct you directly to the COVID-19 website, and things are categorized very nicely and neatly for your convenience to find what it is that you need. So if you haven't already checked it out, I highly suggest you go to that website because there's so much great information there.
Are you extending the pass-fail option? Advisors communicated that students were not eligible and then changed the status 2 days before deadline.
Katrina, I'm going to let you take that question because it seems to be about advising and pass-fails.
Sure. Well, the deadline itself has not been extended. However, you can, as an individual student, appeal to your academic advisor. So just so you understand, on the back end, there's a lot of work that has to be done. And so we had set a May 1st deadline of students letting their advisor know whether they wanted to do the pass, no pass option, because we want to make sure that faculty, when they go into enter grades, only enters either the pass, no pass option or the actual grade. And it takes a little bit of time to program all that in. But certainly on an individual basis, if you feel like you didn't get the time to make that decision or have that conversation with your academic advisor, please reach out to them this week and have that conversation. And again, pass, no pass, the main people who would want to do that is if you've really been struggling because of some unforeseen circumstances with your family due to this situation, you would certainly, and you're thinking you're going to get a D or maybe an F, maybe you want to move to the pass, no pass. Even if, say, you're a business major or a psychology major, and those typically don't want pass, no pass grades, you will understand that that won't count towards your major, right? But that might be the best option for you in this instance. And so certainly talk to your academic advisor. And you can also reach out to the advising center. They're more than happy to talk to you about these things. But you also have the opportunity to do an incomplete. So certainly if a majority of your work has been done, you have a little bit of time, and you can still do that. You won't need to fill out anything other than talk to your faculty member about, can I get an incomplete? And then you also have the opportunity to do a late withdrawal. And there's no deadline. You have up to a year on a late withdrawal. And so please know that we are here to help you. We know this has been a difficult situation, and this is not about being punitive. So reach out to your academic advisor this week if you're still considering the pass, no pass. But again, know that a late withdrawal and incompletes are another option for you. I hope that answers your question.
Great. Thanks, Katrina.
In order to register for the fall, does the tuition balance still have to be under $1,000, or is that being changed due to the current circumstances?
At this point in time, that is not being changed. Students still would have to come under that $1,000 balance. I would share that there are initiatives in place that we are currently working on. So the CARES Act can support some of that. Also, the tuition program that we'll be rolling out very, very soon to help students on a one-time basis might also be able to help support a student who does not have the funds available to be able to get that balance under $1,000. So that I know will help students a lot as well. But as of right now, that balance still does need to be paid in some way prior to being able to register for courses. Do we have any more questions?
Okay, I'm unmuted again. Let me see. Go to the bottom.
I did see one about pass, no pass and how it impacts your GPA. Is it okay if I just answer?
Yeah, absolutely.
Certainly the pass, no pass, it's not going to impact your GPA. So pass just means you've passed the course. It doesn't impact your GPA. No pass this semester only doesn't impact your GPA. It just says that you didn't pass the course, you're going to need to take it again. So neither will impact your GPA. And so if you were taking 2 classes and you took both as pass, no pass, you would have a 0.0 GPA for this semester. I hope that helps.
So I noticed that someone said that we skipped their last 2 questions, and I'm not sure if those are in the Q&A box or not, but be sure to put your questions in the Q&A box and not the Zoom webinar chat, because as the box scrolls up, we may not see that particular question.
And to address that point, I'm trying to go over questions that have not been answered. Some things that I feel like we've
Hilda,
Sure,
I think
everyone's
Hilda's fading in and out, so I think.
Okay, so Hilda is having some technical difficulties. So I will hop in the Q&A and see what we may have missed.
Can you hear me now?
Ah, yes, much better.
Great. Question, how will funding and applications for graduate assistantships be affected for the fall?
You know, I don't know that we have an expert in the graduate assistantship process on the webinar right now, but why don't you email me? My email address is jorr05@roosevelt.edu with that specific question, and I'll follow up to make sure that you get an answer on that particular question.
Any adjustments to meal plans for fall?
I think I have heard the question because Hilda's having
May
some
want
technical.
to avoid being. Sorry.
I think was your question, are there meal plan adjustments being made for fall? Was that the question?
Since students may want to avoid being in public spaces.
So again, housing will not be required next year. So a student who is not interested in living in housing does not have to because there is no requirement. And also there will be 2 out periods again for housing next year. So a student who has trepidations or concerns will have 2 options to not pay for that meal plan. But if a student does decide to live in housing and does not take advantage of one of those 2 out periods, they would be required to have a meal plan. And we are working with dining to ensure that there are safety measures and protocols in place to make sure that students who are on the meal plan are also in a safe environment where they're going into the dining center as well. And so we'll be sharing more about the dining center plans with our fall re-entry plans as well.
What is the difference between the tuition relief program and the money from the CARES Act?
Yeah, so that's a really great question. So the CARES Act funding, I just hopped right in. I think Michelle's going to answer, but I think I know the answer to this one. It's so rare, no answers to financial aid stuff. So let me have this moment. So the CARES Act funding comes directly from the federal government, and it has specific restrictions in terms of who can access it. It also has specific things that it must go toward. And so 50% must go to student emergency relief, very, very similar to the Laker Grant Fund. And then 50% is for the institution to support the move from face-to-face to online instruction. So the Stronger Tuition Grant is something that we as an institution are doing specifically to support students who may have difficulty paying for tuition. And that is not coming from the federal grant. That's through our Institutional Advancement Office that will be raising funds specifically for this cause, because we know there will be costs that the CARES Act doesn't cover, as well as the Laker grant, which cannot be used toward the cost of tuition. So this is really that third piece of the puzzle that is intended to support students and tuition costs. So those are some of the differences between the two.
Another question, what about those students who didn't qualify for the Laker grant, since it is based on last year's parents' income, keyword last year? I'm not sure. Did you want me to answer that one?
Well, I'll grab it because I think your internet is hopping in and out. But the Laker Grant Fund actually is not tied to your financial aid. So I'm not really sure what that specific thing is about, but I encourage you to reach out to us if you have a specific question about that. But the Laker Grant Fund is not tied to that. You just have to demonstrate your need by filling out the application and sharing how you use the funds, and then provide some documentation. So for example, if you're saying that you need to pay a light bill, we just need to see that light bill, then we'll issue you the money, and then you'll have to send us the receipt that that bill has been paid, but it is not tied to your FAFSA or your financial aid package.
Katrina, can you share your email?
Sorry, yes, I was just getting ready to reply that to everybody. My email is Coakley, so it's KCOAKLEY01 at roosevelt.edu. Again, Coakley01 at roosevelt.edu.
I think we have time for a few more questions if we have any others. Zane is still very excited, by the way. She's nibbling on her foot and she's not being quiet. So if you're hearing something that sounds like it's being eaten, she's eating herself. She's an untrainable animal.
As long as it's not your foot, I think we're good.
No? All right. Well, if you have other questions, of course, this will not be the last time for you to share any areas of inquiry or concerns that you all might have. And I just want to, again, reiterate, if you would like more information about fall and just a recap on some really interesting things that have gone on in the year, I encourage all of you to attend the President's Town Hall on May 8th at 10:30 a.m. Please remember to continue to check the COVID-19 website for ongoing updates. I think I saw someone in the Zoom webinar chat post the link to that site for important updates and announcements. And don't hesitate to reach out if you have any questions or concerns at all. I can be reached at either my personal email address or at the Dean of Students email address, which is dos@roosevelt.edu. So with that, I want you all to stay safe, be well, and as always, now more than ever, go Lakers. Thanks so much and have a great afternoon.